What if I told you that you're not hearing some footsteps in Escape from Tarkov that you definitely could be? Today we're diving into a software tool that lets you apply a couple of audio strategies to not only boost your ability to pick up subtle sounds like footsteps, reloading, or pivots, but also make Tarkov's soundscape a little bit less like holding a stethoscope up to a metal toilet with a flashbang going off inside of it. And hey, considering recent studies show about 75% of gamers in the US and Japan subject themselves to unhealthy levels of game audio, which actually contributes to hearing damage over time, dialing in your sound isn't just about performance and gaining intel, it's about protecting your ears too. For those of you who have been following the channel for a while, you've probably noticed it's taken me a ridiculous amount of time to put this video out. There's a reason for this, but since I don't want to spend time yapping about that before we get to the good stuff, I will put that at the end of the video, along with some plans for the future of the channel for those who are interested. So, moving on to the disclaimer and to preemptively address the "that's not fair" comments I'm sure are going to follow, this Voicemeeter software we're using applies system-level audio changes in post. It does not modify game files, memory, or data in any way and is applied entirely outside of the Escape from Tarkov application. This is the exact same thing as using an equalizer, sound card, or any kind of hardware mixer, which a lot of streamers do. Honestly, the compression we're going to show you how to add kind of creates its own set of problems as well, and is really only situationally viable, so really the main goal here is to give you a setup that can make the audio experience in Tarkov more appealing and less potentially damaging. In fact, I'll go one step further in suggesting you shouldn't use the compression portion of this Tarkov audio guide at all and just stick to the other stuff, but more on that in a bit. Also, I just want to reiterate what I said in part 1 of this 2-part series. The single best audio change you can make in Tarkov is getting a set of multi-driver IEMs. If you haven't watched that video, make sure you check that out as well. Link in the description here. The first thing you're going to want to do is install Voicemeeter Banana or Potato. There's a link in the description below, along with a bunch of others to their website. It's donationware, so you can use these features for free, but obviously I recommend supporting the developer and donating for a key. There are a few guides at the bottom of that page where you can find helpful videos on how to set this program up from the baseline, and in the interest of keeping this video short, we're not going to go through the whole setup, but rather focus on the changes you'll want to make once the software is installed and set up. If you have trouble installing it, Voicemeeter has forums where you can go for help on their main page. There's also a bunch of stuff on Reddit and YouTube as well. Unfortunately, if I guide you through the setup, this is going to be an hour-long video, and we don't want that. So back to your choice between Banana or Potato. I personally use Potato for more inputs and features, but really all you need is Banana unless you're doing that kind of stuff. That being said, you're gonna notice some small differences between your interface and mine during the video. Just keep in mind they're mostly the same, except for I have some additional inputs on the screen that you're not going to see. Once you've got either Banana or Potato installed, you'll want to install one of their virtual audio cable packages. There's a free single cable on the site, which I will link in the description also, but a few people have had issues using this cable. If you're finding compression just does not work at all, you'll need to donate to download the A and B cable pack, but if you're not interested in applying compression, you don't really need the virtual cables for all the other things we're going to do, so you can just skip that step if you want, but it does create one limitation, which we'll get into later if you don't get the virtual cable. So, now you've got Banana installed and or potentially your virtual cable. You 100% want to reboot to finish the installation process and then open up Voicemeeter. Putting just the Tarkov application aside for a moment, this is really an incredible piece of software in general. You can mix multiple audio sources, route audio to different outlets, use compressors, gates, and EQs on all of your inputs independently of one another, even control levels for music, voice chat, games, all independently of one another. If you spend time learning how to use this thing, I'm sure you're going to love it. We're going to start with assuming you've installed the virtual cable. If you haven't, we'll go over your process after this. Once you've got your interface open, the first thing we're going to do is route our Tarkov audio through our virtual cable so that we can modify the audio prior to it getting to our virtual input. If you're on Windows 10 or 11, you should be able to search the sound mixer options and open that. Once there, you'll see a list of applications that are open. You'll want Tarkov running in order for this to show up here on this list, and you may also want to turn the menu music on in Tarkov so that you can verify everything is working once you're set up without loading into a raid. Now, You want to change your Tarkov audio output to whatever your virtual cable is. Once this is done, you're going to want to change one of your hardware inputs to the virtual cable by clicking the Select Input Device text in the Voicemeeter software and then selecting your virtual cable like this. Mine, I changed in the sound devices options to Tarkov audio just to make it kind of easy for you to see, but yours will say something like virtual cable A or something like that. Click that to add this to your hardware input strip. After you've done this, you're going to want to be sure you've got your assignation button ticked for whichever physical device you want your audio sent to. These are represented by the A1, A2, and A3 hardware outs at the top, which should have been covered in your setup instructions, but basically you want to assign one of those to your headset or whatever it is you're listening to your Tarkov audio through. Then assign your Tarkov audio virtual cable to the corresponding A number whatever of your headset. In my case, I have 3 different headsets most of the time, so I'm ticking all 1 through 3 on that sidebar. At this point, you should see some activity on the meter from the music if your virtual cable is working correctly in the interface, and you shouldn't hear that Tarkov music playing. If you don't hear anything, something is wrong and you're going to need to troubleshoot. The most common issue I've run across is Windows reassigning default devices or someone not assigning the Voicemeeter input or output to their default sound device. You're going to want to verify that your software is set to both the default input and output, and hopefully that resolves your issues. If not, you may need to go back through your setup instructions and kind of double check everything. Next, what we're going to do is probably the most important thing, and that's create what is called a brick limiter for the Tarkov audio that we've just set up. This is basically creates a limit to how loud an audio signal can be coming through that input or output. And the reason we're doing this is so that those close-up explosions and gun reports don't damage your hearing over time. Nothing says immersive milsim like permanent tinnitus from a grenade someone threw 80 meters away. A lot of people are pretty surprised to learn that sounds as low as 85 decibels can damage your hearing with prolonged exposure. And honestly, if you're turning Tarkov up to hear the quieter sounds, I can pretty much guarantee you those loud bits you're hearing are going over that threshold. That study I was talking about earlier in the video, yeah, most of those guys that were looked at and were actually subjecting themselves to these kinds of sounds were almost all playing shooters. So to set this up, you simply click your mouse on the monitor strip and then move the limit up or down by dragging. Alternatively, you can right click to set a numerical value. Just right click on that bar there. It'll pop up a box where you can place a numerical value in there. I usually set this to -8, but it's going to be completely subjective to your system and your game volume and all sorts of other variables. So you're going to need to play with this and see where you want it. All right, now that our ear holes are protected, it's time to really set the only equalizer I recommend. For more details on exactly why I don't like complicated equalizer settings or SteelSeries sonar or any of those other things, check out our part 1 video in the description. So now you're going to right click the EQ button in your virtual cable strip. This is going to open up your EQ settings. Since we already know Tarkov's soundscape is incredibly complex, we really only want to roll off frequencies which we are 100% sure we don't need any information from, and really the only bands that don't have potential information in them are going to be the very low frequency bands where you're getting some ambient noises or, you know, some low whispering of the ghost of Nikita talking about feet picks. That's really about it. You can turn this off and on by left clicking the EQ button on the strip, and if it's not lit up, then it's not on. But essentially what we're going to do is set up what's called a high pass filter by clicking that button here and using the dial to modify the frequency to around 126 hertz. And that's pretty much it. You just set it and forget it. That's going to take out some of that lower frequency ambient and Nikita speak that we were talking about. And I don't really touch anything else as far as EQs go. So the last part is we're going to set up our compression. Again, I don't really recommend doing this because it's only situationally valuable and can actually make certain situations worse for you if you're not aware of what you're doing. But essentially, the basics of the compression are that it makes quiet sounds louder and louder sounds quieter. The goal here is to accentuate the more faint noises without going overboard and making all of the other sounds louder than they really need to be. So before we get into that, let's go over the pros and cons before you decide if you're even going to do this. Me personally, I do run a tiny bit of compression most of the time. If you're not making a bunch of noise yourself, this definitely helps you hear faint audio sources better and will also make those explosions and gunshots quieter. That's pretty much it. That's the only pros we have, okay? So for the cons, you can pretty much guarantee that rain is going to make you want to uninstall the game. So you'll probably either need to run compression at a very low level or just flat out turn it off when it's raining. If you're making a lot of noise yourself while looting, running, mouth breathing in your Tagilla mask while you're cosplaying on Factory, then this can make those sounds louder, which in turn makes other sounds harder to hear. The ambient is definitely louder in general as well, so you've got to take that into consideration when deciding whether or not you're going to do this. If you do want to run this, I recommend running at a pretty low level, which I'll show you how to adjust in a moment. To add the compression, we simply drag the dial on the compression interface on the strip up to somewhere between 0.5 to 1. Generally, I would start as low as possible and move on from there. Anything beyond that, at least for me, it makes the other game sounds really uncomfortable. You can get into more detailed compression settings by right-clicking the dial and changing things like attack time, but we're not going to get into all of that for this video. For our purposes and just Tarkov audio stuff, the default settings are just fine. Test this in some offline raids, of course, before you settle on where you want to be, and that's really all there is to adding compression to your game sound. To circle back to those who do not want to use compression and or didn't install the virtual cable, you can still use both the EQ and the limiter settings on the regular inputs of Voicemeeter. So you're not creating the Tarkov audio loop using the virtual cable, you're just going to modify whichever strip that your default audio is going to. So to set the brick limiter up, you're just going to click the smaller monitor box below whichever the three inputs you're using for your game sound and do the same thing. You just drag that limiter to wherever you want it, or again, you could right click to set a numerical value. I also do this for my browser audio and my Discord audio and the other inputs. It's pretty handy. So in my case, I've got a limiter set on pretty much every set of incoming audio. The EQ in these strips is only a 3-channel, so it's really not useful for our purposes, but there's a little bit of a way around it. If you just want to use the dials, all you can do is adjust the treble, bass, and mids rather than a specific set of frequencies, so there's not much use to us for this. The workaround for this is to apply the same high pass we discussed earlier to your actual physical output using this button right here. You can see each one of these first 3 or 5, depending on if you're using banana or potato, correspond with your A1 through 5 physical, like headsets and speakers and such. So you just want to select whichever one you have your headset routed to, whether it's A1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, then right click the EQ button to set the high pass. You just do the same thing as before. You go at 126 Hertz and then you're done. To enable it again, you have to click the button and light it up. The only disadvantage here is that this applies to the whole headset rather than just one single game audio source. So if you're using that headset for doing something other than playing Tarkov, you might want to turn it off because you're going to miss some lows, like if you're listening to bassy music. So that pretty much covers all of the Tarkov specific functions that I use Voicemeeter for. I'll address some of what I assume are going to be common reactions to this. Yes, this adds latency to your audio. It's a minuscule amount when using the default buffer size, and Voicemeeter estimates this to be between somewhere like 5 to 10 milliseconds. Most human beings aren't going to notice that unless you're some kind of ultra sensitive bionic hearing person. I have never once experienced any noticeable audio lag or latency while using this setup, but just in case, I am going to put a latency tester link in the description of this video, which you can, once you get everything all set up, you can check to see if you have any audio lag before it gets you killed in Tarkov, of course. Yes, this is complex and has a learning curve. Sorry, I just don't know of a more simple way to do any of this. There probably is one, but I didn't learn it or don't know it, and this is what I've got. Yes, there are a few issues with stability here and there. I do experience some odd audio dropouts from time to time, but they're short and they're very rare. Generally, if you have the auto restart button checked in the menu, these will self-resolve after a brief moment, maybe 5 seconds or so. Yes, I realize this may not work with everyone's systems. This is very much a your mileage may vary sort of guide. And on that note, this program does also require some system overhead, so if you're already lacking in CPU, while running a CPU bottlenecked game, it might not be a wise investment of your time to do any of this. Also, yes, Windows updates will change your default devices and make you want to pull your hair out. If you're wanting a plug-and-play solution with zero maintenance, this isn't it. You're going to have to find a different way to accomplish these things. And I should cover most of the negative stuff I'm imagining we're going to see beyond the inevitable stop yapping and get to the point crowd. But hey, if you stuck around for this long, you're probably the type of person that likes dialing things in just right. So I do want to circle back and address my absence from YouTube as well as Twitch and give you some information on the trajectory of the channel. My upload schedule's pretty much always been ultra inconsistent since this is really mostly a hobby for me and IRL is generally always super busy for a variety of reasons. However, this video took far longer to get to than I wanted, especially after saying it was coming. But the good news is the reason for that delay, for the most part, is a cross-country move, which will also allow me to have more space for studio stuff. Over this time, though, I do plan on diversifying the content a little bit, especially with our live streams on Twitch, and you'll just have to stay tuned to see exactly what I mean, but I'm pretty excited about it. For the time being, my uploads on YouTube will remain pretty sporadic. We'll definitely be returning to streaming when we get settled in the new place. So that's all I've got for you today. If this helped you hear footsteps you were missing, or at least made Tarkov's audio less abusive than its normal coked out Diddy party levels, consider giving the video a like, maybe even a sub if you're into this kind of tactical tinkering. Got questions or want help setting up your own voice meter layout? Drop a comment and I'll do my best to help you out. Thanks for watching. Take care of your ears out there. Remember, you can't insure those.